This is the Women Your Mother Warned You About podcast, sponsored by Sales Gravy. I'm Gina Tremarco, Master Sales Trainer and Director of Coaching Programs at Sales Gravy. Before we get started with this week's episode, I want you to go and check out Sales Gravy University. Sales Gravy University is the place where sales professionals and sales leaders from across the globe go to learn and upscale. And right now, if you're a brand new user and you've never used Sales Gravy University before, you can get your first course for free by using coupon code free course when you go to learn.salesgravy.com. That's coupon code free course when you go to learn.salesgravy.com. And hey, I've got several courses there that you can check out. So I hope to see you there. But let's go ahead and get started with this week's episode.
So the two new services that I'm introducing, it's the Sales Enablement Podcast, like showrunner. So think of doing internal podcasts. So just on all fronts there. And then the other is like, you ever do one of those murder mystery dinners?
Oh,
who murdered the deal?
My God. Ooh, you know, I know that you're like setting me up for what we're going to talk about on this podcast, but I hate to break it to you, the show already started.
Did it really? That's even better. That's even better.
Yeah. I mean, like it just makes sense. It just feels right that the Women Your Mother Warned You About episode is on with me, Gina Tremarco, and Amy, who I will butcher her last name every time.
Hrehovcik.
No, I'm not going to do it. No, you.
Hrehovcik.
Do it again.
Check. That is, it's a silent, it's the silent H. It like throws you.
Okay, no H.
Ignore the
H. Ignore the H. Warners, we have brought back Amy Hrehovcik. Yes, there we go. Because we love her so much, and she was so great on the last show. This show, by the way, is sponsored by Sales Gravy. In case you didn't catch that, I've got to put that out there. And Susanna's not here. And the reason why she's not is she just got back to London and is sleeping. I mean, the nerve.
The
nerve. She needs sleep. Come on.
I was about to say that it's overrated, but no, I'm not even putting it out there. Like sleep is very important, as is rest, and like down with the hustle culture.
It is. I agree with you. I'm all about the sleep.
Well, you're a little bit ahead of me. As we were just talking about, I don't even know where the episode started, but I'm happy to report.
Who murdered the deal?
That's for the sales enablement stuff, but officially carrying a bag again. And I think on Friday, I opened up 3 opportunities. And Gina, I was on cloud fucking 9. Like I forgot about the rush. I forgot what it felt like and the excitement. And I don't know, like sometimes it's easier to remember the hard or whatever. I don't know, fill in the blanks. But anyway, I can't wait to report back to you like when the first one closes. But anyway, one step at a time. But who murdered the deal? Have you ever done one of these? One of the murder mystery dinners?
Oh my God. Yeah. So when I owned a theater, we actually produced a couple murder mysteries for clients. Like it was, things that they asked us to do, which wasn't necessarily a ballywick, but we did it. And I've also performed in many murder mysteries throughout my lifetime.
Okay.
Which are super fun. But I love this concept of who murdered the deal. Like, elaborate on this.
Okay. So like I'm on a quest to make the experience of learning how to sell more fun, right? More joy, like does not have to be drudgery. And so I think like this is generally where my head's at. And I like to keep it fresh. And so I love going to these murder mystery dinners. It's been quite some time. I've only done a couple, but like parties, right? Where everybody gets your character ahead of time and and so listeners, for anybody that's never done one of these, the idea is it's like a real live game of Clue. And at the end of the experience, right, everybody comes up with their version of the answer, right? Who murdered the whatever it was, and then why. And so for who murdered the deal, think enterprise selling, think IT, think legal, think multiple departments and exec sponsors and champions and like whatever, all these characters and agendas, some spoken, some unspoken. So again, listeners, when you are given a character at one of these murder mystery dinners, let's say it's your sister's birthday party, and so she gives you one of the good characters, they will tell you explicitly on your card, right? So you have your whole story, and then it's what you're able to share, and then the things that you only share when asked this. And so now when we marry that with the Who Murdered the Deal, the idea is that people would uncover like some of the unspoken or harder to suss out elements and try to, so you have to go around and speak to everybody.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's a safe and easy way to learn. I don't know, maybe if somebody's just stepping into like liaising with legal for the first time, or the organization is transitioning from, transactional sale to an enterprise sale. So this concept of multi-threading through an organization is new. But the idea is everybody kind of wanders around, has conversations with each other, tries to figure out where I used to call it landmines, right? Well, selling. And I would say I neutralized landmines so that nobody on the buying team like steps on anything and like loses a foot or something. But anyway, at the end of this 2-hour experience, then everybody comes together and does the write-up of who they think murdered the deal and then why. So maybe just as one example, it's, this is the person who purchased the software that you're replacing, and they're emotionally invested in that original decision, but they're not going to tell anybody that because it's illogical and they know that it wasn't a good decision in the first place. But they have enough
because it was emotional. There's like an emotional motive.
They have enough clout, and so yeah, that's the thing.
Oh,
fun, right?
I'm seeing like a game.
Oh yeah.
Like I'm seeing like a card game. I'm seeing a training. Like
I was originally thinking like ASM or like sales kickoff. We've all been through these like or even a conference, like the drudgery of the same old. But this, not only is it fun, not only is it experiential, not only is no one doing it, but it's also a phenomenal way to teach people how to think about your buying motion.
Yeah. So think about this, because I've been in these, I've done these shows, right? And I've attended as a guest, right? Not necessarily as an actor. And you have to, and it's interesting. Like, I'm so fascinated by this. This is such a cool topic. You've got to go around the room and ask all these questions. Mm-hmm. So think about the discovery process, right? I have to go and like dig deep for motive, right? What would motivate all of these people? Who could possibly be the guilty party? And I got to go and interview them, right? So I can figure it out. Now, meanwhile, there are other people, other guests at the show who are like, leave me alone. I just want to eat my chicken.
Well, this is where I think you can, what's fun about doing this with sales teams is that you've got that. I don't believe in like aggressive use of dashboards. And I think you got to be careful with like how competition tips into like toxic. However, there is a competitive edge to our profession. And so I think that the gamification aspect of this experience, right? Maybe it's a prize, right? Whoever gets figures out who it is. But also, Gina, think about it from like the team building perspective. You're physically moving around, interacting with people. And let's say 10% of them were given characters or whatever. And, depending on, how big we build it out or whatever, but you're also in this fun and different context, meeting and interacting with your peers, in just a completely different way.
I love it because of like, you have all your suspects, right? You've got your 10 suspects. And again, if you haven't done one of these shows, right, you're given a character description.
Yeah, like, ahead of time. Costume.
I'm the CFO, and here are all the things about Susie CFO, right? Like, I mean, because we deal with this every day. This just came up in a group of clients that I was training this week on selling the price increase, and a deal got stalled because of a CFO, and that deal got stalled. It's not murdered yet, but the so I was actually walking the client through. I'm like, walk me through what happened, right? As an existing client. They've been a client for a while. It's a complex deal, a key account, and they had to present the price increase, and the client's like, they did everything that the client asked for. And then all of a sudden came back and said, we've decided to go to the competitor because they're not going to give us the same kind of increase. And I'm like, all right, there's got to be more to this.
Yeah, that's
right?
never the first thing. Listeners,
right?
It's never the first thing that they tell you. Never.
Yeah. It's right. They're not always telling you everything, right? It's like, okay, well, tell me more about this. Like, they've been a client for a long time. You have a relationship. You did all the things they asked for. Who murdered the deal, right? Like, what happened? And he's like, well, there's this new CFO. I'm like,
it's always a who too. It's always a who. It's always a who. And it is a big mystery. And I think like,
I was like, let's talk. I'm like, there's a new CFO. I'm like, okay, let's dial through this. The CFO stopped it. Like, the CFO kiboshed it. And went with the competitor. Let's talk about
what? Yeah, like what? Now wanting a 3% increase.
Yeah, I said let's talk about CFO persona. Let's talk about the buyer persona of a CFO, right? How they think. Now let's layer that. Right, this could be part of the game, right? This all these layers. I'm like, let's layer that. It's a new CFO, right? So already you got this black and white person who cares about numbers, but you got the new person. And I see this all the time when there's multiple stakeholders involved in a large deal. When I have a lot of new stakeholders, especially if I'm dealing with anything tech or SaaS, like I see this repetition, right? All these new people, well, I've been here for 3 months and I've got a new team and I've been here for 8 months and I'm still trying to figure out what I'm doing here. And they're all part of the process. They're just trying to figure out where the coffee is. And they're not even clear on what they don't even know their own stated objectives. I said this to a prospect the other day. I'm like, all right, you guys have to actually all get on the same. I got them all in the room together, which I was excited about. I'm like, great. I got you all in the room together and you're all on different pages until you guys collectively get on the same page, right? Like, I can't give you solutions until I understand what the real problems here are and what the priorities are, right? Like, you have all those layers. So in this particular situation with the CFO is new. He's trying to prove himself. He can get a win. All he cares about is winning right now. How are we going to help him win? Let's get him involved in the I'm like, have you actually met with him? He's like, no. I'm like, all right, step one.
Yeah.
How do we get the CFO on the call? Okay, well, they're like, well, what if we can't get Gina? What if we can't get the CFO on the call? I'm like, okay, well, then let's arm your advocate, your coach, your influencer, whoever you're working with. Let's arm them with the ammunition they need to at least try to get that to the CFO. Like,
it's, you know what, I'm so glad that we're speaking about this because it's one of the things that I attributed to my like really strong win rate. I, like most of us, was never able to get over, what is it, 75%? Like but it was that I was the most important thing about the opportunity, about the deal, when we're talking deal strategy, it was team selection. It was buying team selection. And I was meticulous with, meeting everybody. Like when I was doing discovery, it's like, well, who else do you know in the org that's having this problem? And how about over there from that department? And in the same way that we would prompt people for referrals in a way. And so I think that was a big part of what made how I sold a little bit different, right? Just the level of thinking and intention that went into team selection. And so now when I look at some of the buying trends right now about larger buying teams and representation from different departments like finance and like IT, right? And I sold into legal, so I've always loved that part of it. But then there's a scariness aspect to being on the buying team and like exactly what you just shared, like reaching out to the CFO, like still though, we got to do it or else we're at risk of having the deal be murdered and not knowing who murdered it.
Yeah, it was interesting to me to like probe through that conversation with them, right? It was a real case situation of trying to sell a price increase, right? Which is what we were teaching. And then the deal stalling. And he's like, well, what do you think? And I'm like, well, I need more information. Right. Like, and then once we walked through the process, it was like, oh, right? You got to figure out who the potential murderers are, right? It's like anticipating crime, I guess.
And go back, like for anybody that's listening to this, like listeners, I'm thinking about validation rules in a CRM when the deal is closed lost and you got to close it off, get it off the pipeline, right? Sometimes I see this done poorly where we don't have any validation rules to move from stage to stage, but at the end you've got to pick a reason, and it's almost like this and then we don't teach or empower people how to have these conversations, right? With the knowledge, even right, the first thing that person tells you, it's never the reason, but then you got all this like crappy data in the CRM, which is of all of our win-loss reasons, it's just a big shit show comedy for me. What I love about this concept and facilitating these murder mystery events, aside from being able to, play around at like all these ASMs with this like just ridiculousness, that just seems like way more fun to me than training somebody on like whatever contracting. I love the teaching people how to think. And I love the fun aspect of it too. Again, it doesn't have to be drudgery. And this is the best that I was able to come up with. So I'm glad that you're digging it.
I'm all for it. And you and I are definitely on the same page of, humanizing things and making things fun. And obviously with an improv background, that's a big part of who I am. I am launching a new class in June called Selling with Humor. So that just went public today. And I'm super excited about that because it's been something I've been wanting to do for a couple years. I recall my sister's a comedian. I've been trying to convince her to come on the show, right? To talk about humor. And like when I would do field training, right? One of the first things that people would notice is that from meeting to meeting, I have the same damn jokes and I use them all the time. It's not even, you don't even have to get crazy with it. But like when you make people laugh, they want to spend time with you. And so but you are the teacher on this front. Like what's the curriculum about? Like, what are the learning objectives? Like I almost want to like leave this podcast and go like hop in this training because I got to see what you came up with. Well, there's, I'll give a couple tips. I'll give a couple tips that we'll explore. And, I hesitated for a couple of years in launching this because I couldn't wrap my head around how to make it happen. And since I've been at Sales Gravy now for almost 2 years, I've kind of figured out how to make these things happen from a virtual perspective. There's a couple of really simple rules of thumb in comedy. 2 key rules of thumb that we talk about are repetition and contrast, right? So funny comes from relatability, right? So one thing I would say, when I owned a theater for 12 years and we would have these classes and people would show up and say, like, I'm so funny, I can't wait to sign up for class. And I'm like, please don't. I don't want you actually showing up thinking you're funny. Because you need to be a little more of a vulnerable canvas with it, because the funny comes from relatability, right? And so you can be intentional with it, but first you have to like put training wheels on and be able to relate, because people will laugh at things that they relate to, that they connect with. So let's think about stand-up comedians, right? Like there are stand-up comedians out there that you like more than others, right? That you connect with, that you think are funny. And there's stand-up comedians out there that you think are funny. And there's a huge difference between improv and stand-up, right? In an improv world, we are working in an ensemble. It's all about making the other person look good.
That's what I was thinking when you said about the I'm funny. I heard ego and doesn't play nicely and it's in the sandbox.
So the I'm funny person is a stand-up comedian, and I'm not trying to shoot down stand-up, and I've done stand-up just to say I've done it, and I hated it because I don't like being alone. I learned this a lot through COVID too. I like being part of a group. I like being part of an ensemble. I like being part of a team to win. And when you're in an improv ensemble, you are part of a team and your number one job is to make everybody else around you look good, right? The people that you're performing with and the people you're performing for, right? The emphasis has to be on everybody but you. When you're a stand-up comedian, you're like, look at me, I'm funny, right? And you script it out, and you script out funny beats that are relatable. But let me tell you, if you get in front of an audience that doesn't connect with the stories that you're telling in your scripted set, they're not going to laugh. And so you have to be able to pivot. Now, the best stand-up comedians are the ones who are improv trained because they can improvise in the moment of a scripted set, right? I've seen some comedians, and you may have seen comedians where they're delivering their stand-up. The audience is like, you can hear a pin drop, and the comedian goes, "Hey, that was funny," right? That's the insecure salesperson. Hey, look at me over here. Why don't you? This is a good deal, right? It's so me focused, right? That they don't know how to pivot and realize the audience is not connected. So funny comes from relatability. What does this have to do with repeat, right? Because we talk about two things, repeat and contrast. Repeat is when you can repeat back things that people have experienced, right? Relatability. One of my favorite stand-up comedians, Sebastian Maniscalco, Italian from Jersey-ish, I think. I don't know.
So our people. Well, even though you're not from Jersey, we're from Chicago, but
right. But the Italian people, right? Like it doesn't matter.
I'm half Italian, but the Slovak name is the
okay. Well, I'm half Italian, half German. Okay, so
that's right.
But I resonate with the Italian, right?
Yeah.
So every story he tells, like I pee my pants because I relate to his stories about growing up Italian. Every single story, right? That's why I laugh so much at him. Now, I'm sure that some people don't laugh at him because they're like, what is he talking about? You know, things falling off the back of a truck, right? Like I relate to that, right? So when you can repeat a story or you repeat something, people laugh at repetition, right? Think about Saturday Night Live. I'm dating myself. Like a Night at the Roxbury. Those guys who are like shaking. They're like everything they do. Right. We're doing the physical. Like they're moving their head together. Dumb and Dumber. Right. They behave the same. That's a repetition. Those repetitions, right? That people will laugh at. Not to the opposite of that. Contrast. Contrast is a disrupt. Contrast is the unexpected. When you do something that they didn't expect to happen, that they didn't see coming, right? Like you think about something that just the two things don't make sense together.
Yeah.
That unexpected creates comedy that people will laugh at because they're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that happened. Like, is that for real?
Put it together. Okay.
So those are two keys to it. So lightening up a sales conversation, right? There's a couple things like a callback. Like I refer to this as a callback of I call back things in a conversation, in a discovery conversation that I might have heard 30 minutes ago in our conversation. And somehow I will loop it back in.
Okay.
Or I will take that scenario that's relatable that I heard you talk about and find the funny in it, right? Because sometimes the things that we struggle with, right? Like we laughed about, yes, it's always someone who kills the deal, right? It's like that new CFO. Like we can laugh at that because you and I have both have experienced it. So if you want to be funny, you have to really pay attention to what people are saying so that you can connect with it and then heighten it. And this is where heighten and exaggerate a little bit. This is where the yes and that I teach comes into place because the yes and requires you to really hear what people are saying, repeat it back, and then add onto it and make it bigger, right? And so that's just kind of an overview. I don't want to give it all away.
No, I don't want you to give it all away either. It's just interesting. I was listening to that, and I'm glad that you described both of those words because my brain was going in a different direction on what you meant. And for example, like contrast is one of those things that comes up when we teach about how to tell stories, right? Or a story arc, which is one of the things that creates a deeper, richer emotional experience, right? To have it be high tension and then release, tension, release, tension, release. And so those cycles also bring you closer to the person that you're interacting with. And then repetition is, I don't know. I heard that and I heard like, mass communications, propaganda, mind control, say the same things over and over again, and from different places, from different people is literally 101 propaganda. But those are different. I'm glad that I shut the hell up and was listening to what you were saying. But like, okay, so I'm still not understanding the connection between those things and the joke. And I guess
it's not so much about a joke.
Okay.
Right. So let's differentiate that.
Okay.
Right. Like, because some people can, when you say, oh, this makes me crazy when, like, people would hear I own an improv comedy theater. Right. And they'd be like strangers would do this and make me nuts. Oh, tell me a joke. It doesn't work that way. It's not a joke. Right. Like, go back to stand-up comedians. They're telling, they have a punchline. They have a setup and a punchline, right? That's a joke.
Mm-hmm.
Improv comedy, right? When we're finding that humor, it's actually something we call, this is in the class, game of the scene.
Okay.
What is the game in the conversation? Meaning, what is the first thing? Now let's think about buying behavior.
Mm-hmm.
What is the first, or buyer cues, right? When they react in a conversation,
mm-hmm.
if you pay enough attention, you can see what they're reacting to, right?
Mm-hmm.
You can figure out the buying cue,
mm-hmm.
right? When they...
Also known as situational awareness, friends.
Yes, exactly,
mm-hmm.
right? So your EQ, you got to have some good EQ because you have to be self-aware, socially aware. You have to pay attention to what's going on and watch for reaction. Now,
who's looking at who, whose eyebrows raised, all of it. Yeah.
All of those things. Like, this is probably, it's interesting. This is probably one of the hardest classes that we would teach at our theater, Carolina Improv.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a level 4 class. It was like a master class. It was called Game of the Scene. And it was taking their comedy to the next level, right? Because we're taking suggestions from the audience, right?
Mm-hmm.
Think about a sales scenario.
Mm-hmm.
Your prospect, your customer is giving you things to work with, right? Mm-hmm. So you're getting that from them, and then you have to do something with it. I got the idea from the audience. Now I have to perform to get a response, right? I have to perform to get an action out of them, which is laughter.
Okay.
Right? I'm trying to compel them to laugh. So let's think about compelling people to buy.
Mm-hmm.
And so I put it out there, and I'm watching for their buying behavior. I'm watching to see if I've engaged them.
Yeah, if they chuckled a little.
Right. And so that was step one.
Mm-hmm.
This was the hardest class to teach. People would repeat it over and over again because this requires so much cerebral intention to paying attention to the detail and thinking quickly all at the same time. And it's like, it's there's a contrast to that, right? You're asking me to slow down and speed up at the same time. And that's what I would tell them. So this is what I would say. Mm-hmm. I want you to pay attention to the first thing that they laugh at. The first time that they laugh or groan or have a negative response to. The second you hear that, especially if they've laughed. So if you have a positive reaction,
go in that direction.
Right. So you have positive reaction, game on. That's the game of the scene. Now you got to ask yourself, this has to happen super fast.
Yeah. And within the improv, it's with all your, it's like the strength of the team too. So hopefully everybody's picking up on it as well.
Correct. So your ensemble has to be really strong. Everybody on the team's got to be really strong at this, right? So because we can't talk to each other. I have to look at you and literally our eyes have to speak to each other like, got the game, I got the game. Do you think we got the game? But we can never let the audience know that we're talking to each other with each other's eyes, right? And if you go into a different direction than I thought we were going to go into, I have to follow you. Because if I don't follow you, if I negate you, I look like an asshole. So I have to all right, she ran with it. I didn't have enough initiative fast enough. I'm going to run with her, follow her, support her. That's my job right now. When all this is going on in your head, all right, they just laughed. This is the internal conversation of an improviser. Okay, they just laughed. What did they just laugh at? They laughed when I did an accent. What was the accent I just did? Oh, that was a French accent. Why was that so funny? These are this is internally going on in your head the entire time in 10 seconds. All right, they just laughed at that. I'm not really sure. We call it the universal truth. What was the universal truth behind that laughter? Right? Because you can drill it down. Did they laugh at the accent? This is where contrast kicks in. Did they laugh at the accent because it was unexpected? Right? Is that why they laughed? Did they laugh at a physical movement? Right? That was another way to like figure out the audience. Was the audience a cerebral audience or physical audience? Two different audiences. There are audiences that love slapstick and physicality. They love seeing you do things that require you to move around, right? And then there's an audience that loves the wit of the unexpected. So you got to figure out your audience really fast and then move from there, right? So if they're laughing at me doing an accent, then I'm going to heighten it and do it some more. And then I'm going to heighten it and do it some more until the laughter stops. And there's a rule of 3. So you take it to a height and then you move on to something new, find a new game. But this requires you to really pay attention to the audience. Now, this would happen a lot. We would have like certain phrases for audiences. There is the travel park audience. Okay. So the travel park audience is an audience where we would perform outside at a travel park, and every possible extreme that could happen would happen. And we hated it. We loved it and hated it at the same time because it's a travel park. We're outside. We don't have microphones. We're on the ocean in Myrtle Beach. You have the sound of the ocean coming in. You got to talk really loud. We're up against a basketball court. Seriously, they're playing basketball while we're doing show. On the other side of the pavilion, they have like these, you mine for gems. I don't know how else to explain it. And then there's a tie-dye station for tie-dyeing t-shirts, right? This is all happening at the same time while you're trying to perform. And many of them had a limited education. Let me just leave it like that. And you're trying to entertain them, and you're quickly figuring out, okay,
there's slapstick.
At the travel park, we only do slapstick because that audience only likes slapstick. Anything else that's a deeper, like guessing game or something that's more cerebral, that audience doesn't like that. So we figured that out over time. Or we would have the Friday night audience. The Friday night audience in a tourism town is the audience that they're leaving on Saturday because it's a Saturday to Saturday stay. They're out of money on Friday and they're stressed out that they have to leave vacation tomorrow and they have to pack. And all they're thinking about is packing. I swear to God, they would tell me this because I'm like, hey, come back tomorrow. Here's a buy one, get one. Come back. We have to pack tonight. It was like a thing. So they were completely distracted by that. But once we understood those different personas, we could play the shows differently. Saturday night audience, they just arrived in town. They're tired. They drove 14 hours from PA. The kids have been screaming and they just want you to entertain them. They want slapstick, right? So it's understanding
all the different context and how it mixes and matches. So there are a couple of things that just came to me, and I want to call them out. The first is the amount of science here that you've absolutely mastered. And I know this is true as someone, because you had your club as well as now teaching the course. But like, I think a lot of people, what they get wrong about the concept of art versus science, or the right brain versus the left brain, is that it's a zero sum. It's either or, right? And that is, it's not accurate. When I think of art versus science, when I think of a person having to learn the science of something first, the fundamentals, the building blocks, the principles, the framework, whatever, pick your language. And then once you have a basic not a basic understanding, but once you've got your foundation, once you have the science, then you can start to create the art. And what almost like broke my heart a little bit while you were sharing that, as it relates to sales and tech sales in particular, is how little room we leave for the fact that everyone is a special snowflake, and that there are no two different buying teams or buying motions, right? And the context of how long have they been in the job? When is the next shareholder report? Whose boss just got fired? Like, all of these different factors impact the way that someone is thinking and someone is feeling. I mean, I could take this a step further, and like, people change, right? People have different, they could show up differently at different times in the same damn day based on something that happened. And so having this strategy, or at least the framework to think about these intangible aspects. It's just you're one step closer to not having the deal be murdered. But anyway, like all of those things, I heard mastery and I heard intention, and I don't know, like I don't know if I would be a little bit intimidated by all of that. Right. I think of humor and I think of a way to release tension in like hard moments.
Well, yeah. So yeah, let's get back to relatability.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
Relatability equals repetition, right? So if we take it from that stance, and it took me a while to wrap my head around this so that I could frame the course, right? Because if I take what I've been teaching about repetition and contrast, how does that work in sales and in life, right? Go back to relatability, right? Because if you understand where people come from, you can inject humor and be more engaging and get them to buy in when you can say, hey, I totally relate. I relate to that kind of complex deal, right? Like you can find ways to relate. Like, oh, I remember when I was new on the job.
My dad used to say, find common ground and go in that direction.
Yeah, find common ground. People laugh at common ground, right? It's sort of like misery loves company or winning loves company, right? So there's a couple. I remember when I was going through my divorce a few years ago, everybody had an opinion about how to divorce. And so there's some level of like trying to have like that misery and relatability of like trying to find what they're trying to do is like help you lighten up about your tragedy of your divorce, right? And then you find the perfect partner, which I have, right? And then all of a sudden I start noticing all these other perfect partnerships, right? That I relate to, and we can have these funny stories together. So it goes back to, can you find those things that you have the common ground, you can relate to that, and then you can heighten it and create the laughter with it. As long as you're paying attention to them and then putting the focus on them and saying something that's going to make them laugh because you know that they totally get it and they relate it. And so you're kind of exaggerating a little bit of a scenario. I wish I had an exact example in this moment. I'm going to have to pay attention to when I make people laugh.
No, I'm following you. And I think like let's relate it back to like personality tests. Like there was one system, it was called the STAR system. And I'm not here to debate the pros and the cons. Like, don't get me wrong. I'll get down with Crystal Knows or formerly Crystal Knows all day long. But again, with that knowledge that people change as a person that, tips over between introvert and extrovert, truly. But that said, it was called the STAR system, and part of the way that I was taught to use this application was to look for context clues, hear the words, right? So it was houses, right? At this point, it was financial services. And so it was based on the layout of the house, right? If I could see the kitchen, right? It's what's on the walls. Is there dust? Whatever. There's all these different things, but I was taught to put them in a box. And then I had memorized the words that personality type was most likely to respond to. And then I would use them. And so I guess what I'm trying to say is that the correlation between caring enough about the other person, understanding that they're a special snowflake, wanting to understand their experience and to, create sentences, create experiences that resonate for them. Like all of that is an important precursor to actually having a strong connection with them. And I think that there's a lot of different ways to do that. And I'm like, I love pulling in best practices from other professions. And like mixing it in and like seeing how this plays out. And I don't even remember what I was saying about the personality stuff, but yeah, it's just a matter of being intentional. Oh, I remember that. I think as sellers, this is our job. This is our job. And regardless of which kind of sales floor you started in or where you're at now, like part of the job is to care like this and to put in this effort and to, work a little bit harder to understand. And of course, think on your feet and create words, sentences, questions that resonate. And it's hard to do.
Let's circle it back to, who murdered the deal, right? Mm-hmm. Let's circle it back to murder mysteries, right? So I'm cautious on saying this because I don't want to trigger anybody. These days, I don't know who's going to get offended by what, but let's just go back to like a detective, mm-hmm. like a police officer, mm-hmm. right? In a murder mystery, their job is to investigate, to overturn, what's the phrase? Unturn every stone, turn over every stone. I don't know, but you know what I'm saying? Turn over every stone, look for every detail, interview everybody, interrogate, be a little suspect, and ultimately kind of profile, right? Mm-hmm. So they're creating profiles. This is what we're doing in sales. Mm-hmm. And not every, like you said, it's like every unique snowflake. Hopes that's not offensive, but every snowflake is different. And you have to start thinking about approaching people in that way, right? There's the difference between the golden rule and the platinum rule. Golden rule, treat everybody the way you want to be treated. Platinum rule, treat everybody the way they want to be treated. We don't all want to be treated the same. Mm-mm. So I'm not going to treat you the way I want to be treated because you might not want that. Mm-hmm. Right. And people don't think about that because they've been pounded in the head with the golden rule. And if you could step back and think about how does that person want to be treated? I don't know. You want me to figure that out? Yeah, I do. Mm-hmm. Well, that's work. You're right. It is work. Mm-hmm. This is where the intentionality comes in to understanding your audience and then creating right, the profiles, but not being locked into the profiles, because this is the other thing I learned in running an improv theater. Mm-hmm. Just when I thought I knew it all, right, I'd have that guy in the audience, arms folded, never cracked a smile. Mm-hmm. At intermission, we're like, oh my God, the guy in the third row on the right, he hates us, right? And we're doing everything we can to play to him. Mm-hmm. Think about that stakeholder.
Yeah, you're trying to shoot that gate or the goat in the crowd and you're going to miss and hit the sheep.
Yeah, you're spending all your time on that one person that doesn't seem engaged because you want their love and attention, right? And then we get out at the end of the show and that guy, right, we would have a receiving line. Mm-hmm. That guy would come up to us with a huge smile and an extended hand and say, that was amazing. And you're like, what? Like your inside voice was, could you have told your face that? Like
the resting bitch face. Yeah.
Right.
Unaware. Yeah.
So I'm speaking on both sides of my mouth with this. You have to be able to create these personas and profiles, right? And then also stay open-minded that until you have a deeper conversation and connection, you don't absolutely know what's going on.
No assumptions. You make no assumptions. Getting allergic to assumptions, I think, is a great place. But then I'm sad a little bit again, Gina, because most sellers, at least in my experience, are not given the freedom to take that time to think.
Wait. Back up. What do you mean they're not given the freedom?
It's a big rush
to think
when we got to move the deal along. We're going to rush through discovery so we can get to demo. And it's the pipeline. It's in a big race, right, to close the deal. Anyway, it's just something that I see is that we don't like, even in learning how to sell. I don't know if it's changed now, but like, you're up against having to, when you're pitching a new training idea or new experience, a concept, you're up against that. You can't take the sellers out of the field. It's their precious selling time. And so anything that is not customer facing often can be pushed back on as being less relevant, especially just the deep thinking required to suss out what the hell is going on.
Well, I'm gonna put a challenge out there that might not be so popular, right? I hear you. And I've been in organizations where I wasn't the sales director or person, but I was in charge of the entire unit, let's say, right? Okay. Like, so let's just call me the COO in those scenarios. So at the end of the day, I still had responsibility for revenue happening. And I had people to answer to, but I also understood what went into it, that sometimes we couldn't rush it. And I know you want revenue tomorrow, but sometimes the revenue you want tomorrow is based on you guys sucked at planning as an organization or as leadership, let's just say. And now you're sweating and you're freaked out and you're reacting. And this is the pressure you're putting on the rest of the team. I've seen that happen. As salespeople, we're also, I mean, at least the good ones, we're renegades, we're rebels. We kind of do things on our own. I would challenge, I would put it out there, like A/B test it. A/B test it of take one of those prospects and don't rush it and spend time digging a little bit deeper and building a relationship. I'd also be curious. Let's talk about the metrics that matter. How are you doing on closing those deals that you're rushing?
There it is, the win rate right there. It's like we haven't stopped to ask ourselves, could it be better? Right? Like there was a place that I was at and it was like a massive head scratcher because I think the win rate for qualified inbound opportunities was 9%. And I think, I don't even remember if I talked about this on the show, but I had storyboarded like, okay, if we just pivot a little bit of our attention to plug the gaps, right? Look at the improvement that we would have collectively if we improve win rate as a team by like 5%.
Yeah.
But it's like, we're in this shit against the wall and all the activity and going through the numbers that I don't know, it requires a different way of thinking and operating, but often, especially when somebody's coming up through tech sales where they've gone through the SDR channel, like those experiences that they have had throwing shit against the wall, winning with that, 10% under 15% win rate, that worked for them. And so I think that that's also a piece of it that like, you got to like kind of just think about, but I love the question. I think Jeff Bajork is the one that posed this on my show because we did an episode on discovery. Jeff Bajork does discovery and it is like, why can't it be better? Right? Who says that it can't be better? But yeah, no, it's very common to have pretty piss poor win rates. Very common. Under 20%, under 15%. Oh yeah.
I'm just a little speechless.
It's shocking. It is shocking. This is what attracted me to Andy Paul initially, because he was the only fucking one talking about it. He was the only one talking about it. I thought I was going insane. I'm like, we're okay as a team. Our team is collectively hitting 15% of the opportunities that they start.
And
but we're setting them up to lose 85% of the time. Like, who says that is like a good way to operate? I don't get it.
It's because they're rushing, because like, what is your opinion on that?
I mean, I think that there's a million reasons why it could go sideways. Anyone will do. I think it's just to take it even broader, society, we tend to see the relationships around us and treat them as transactions. Look, take Tinder as one example. And so there's that piece of it. I think for the field, right?
Yeah, Tinder has done very well for me. I'm just saying.
That's good. Okay, good. I'm glad to know that. But it's like, but still, it's that transactional. And the same thing with selling too. Like if you've got these like insane activity metrics, right? And the organization hasn't connected your activity back to like the results, right? You're focusing on that activity. It's the number of messages sent, the number of emails sent. And
yeah.
And it does take time and space to think deeply about an organization and about your deal and about the different contexts and to do that research. I mean, I saw a great post yesterday. Somebody was like, just kind of making fun of the bad advice or bad post, but it was like, oh, you don't have to think too hard about it. It's just a sales call. And I think that that's a predominant, I don't know, Gina, look at the way we manage our SDR floors. We're down to the day and task, right? It's like, I've walked away from jobs and like during interview motions where I've gotten pretty deep into it. And it's like listening to people that I'd be working about, like talking about the sellers, like how they're not problem solvers. We have to fix them. They're cogs. They're just going into sale. Like it's nonsense. And so I don't know. It's across the board.
Well, I wish we could solve all these problems today.
Let's just do a murder mystery. Let's just put together a murder mystery dinner. And
I think we should do a murder mystery. A murder mystery SKO. I think we should create it. Maybe we should do it at Maybe I should sell this concept to Jeb and do it at Outbound.
Dude, I'll have it ready by Outbound if you want to do that. We can test it out. No,
maybe he'll listen to this episode and get inspired. But I love the concept of it because it would actually it would reinforce discovery in how to ask the right questions, how to pay attention, because also murder mystery, you got to pay attention to the details of the behavior. Mm-hmm. What are those 10 people that have been assigned the role of suspect, right? They're doing some very specific behavioral things that you need to watch, and that's going to clue you in. So, I mean, all right, let's keep talking about this. We'll just have to have you back. Actually, our next guest is Jeff. We're bringing Jeff back because we love us some Jeff. Are you coming to Outbound?
I was just looking at it. Let's say I'm 75% now. But what
do you have to do to improve that probability rate? What's going on?
I got to look at the dates, and I got to look at there. I'm moving back into, so my grandfather's down in South Carolina. So I'm going to be moving back. I'm going to spend, I think, the month of August, maybe a little bit September with him, just because they took his license, he's getting older, whatever. Okay. So that would be the only thing. But it doesn't sound like a good reason or a good excuse as it's coming out of my mouth now that I'm saying it out loud. So like, but I was surprised, when I was
ready to turn around the objection, but you did it for yourself.
Yeah, okay. No. All right. Well, this, and also, what else I want to talk about? Using more podcasts for internal sales enablement purposes.
Yeah. Okay. So we'll bring you back again.
Yeah.
Because I got to go check my eye. I got to go to the eye doctor.
You don't want to lose your sight. Okay.
No, it's definitely better. But okay, remember that, and we'll bring that one back. But you should definitely be at Outbound.
I think
everybody listening to this should be coming to Outbound, and Jeff Bajorek will be at Outbound. Mm-hmm. I'll be at Outbound. Don't you want to come hang out with me and Susanna at Outbound?
Yeah, I do.
Come on, it'll be, who knows? Maybe we could get the murder mystery thing going. Where's your grandfather in South Carolina?
Greenville.
Okay, that's 4 hours away from me.
Okay. I'm going down for 4 days this week, and so maybe that. But also, don't you have a wedding coming up? I feel like you're busy. Don't you?
I'm a little busy in the month of May. Just a little. Someone said to me, they're like, "You only know one speed. It's like 100 miles an hour. What? You're getting married. You're buying a house. You're like, I'm like, what is the big deal? What? This
is just how we roll.
What's the big deal? It's like no big, because we're keeping everything simple. Let's just be
That's nice.
Clear. Everything is super simple,
That's
right?
Nice.
Like our house is being built. We can move out of the house we're currently temporarily renting. The landlord's cool. We can move out whenever. Like there's just no stress to the simple ceremony in a little church that only seats 12 people. So limited seating of who can come. And then a party in a bar. I mean, come on. Everything's already planned. Good.
You must be the most common-centered bride I've ever spoken to in my entire life. This is awesome. You sound great. That's great.
Been there, done that. And it could have gotten heightened. And my fiance and I were like, we're not letting other people like, we were ready to just go to the courthouse and sign the paper. We're just like doing one step above that. So. We're definitely going to have Amy Hrehovcik back. And this time, what are we going to talk about next time?
I'm following your lead. I'm an equal opportunity shit talker.
What was on the list that we missed today?
Oh, just using podcasting for internal sales enablement purposes. Free people from the tyranny of learning exclusively at their computer.
Okay, so stay tuned for that episode. And our producer, as he hears this, this is a note to him to then send you the schedule for recordings so that we get that scheduled. It was great having you on the show as always. We can talk forever. Susanna missed out. So sorry, Susanna. Hope you're sleeping well. And thank you to our listeners of The Women Your Mother Warned You About. For more information on this show, go check us out at womenyourmotherwarnedyouabout.com. You can also go to salesgravy.com to see more about Susanna and I. And salesgravy.university is the place to go if you want to up-level your game. And if you want to learn how to sell with humor, coming to you June 22nd. I'll be in touch with you soon.
Bye, Gina.
All right. Bye, Amy. Bye, Warners.
Bye.